Hello, and welcome back in this room. Last Tuesday, I saw this talk on this stage by Gerry Smits. Better? Better? Yes, it is. And he showed this slide with a US research on why people use social login on websites. And of course, the first answer, many people answered, well, because it's easier. But more than 20% answered, because I think my personal data is better protected with social logins. Well, that told me that they don't understand anything about privacy and social media. Luckily, scientific research is being done on that topic. And today we have Kàyal with us, and he will tell you all about that.
Thank you. So I'm going to be talking about what is called actually agreement technologies, and subtitle is Getting a Grip on What You Share and What You Receive. Well, here's first the About Me slide. I'm a PhD candidate in my last year in the Intelligent Systems Department at TU Delft. Also working on the Commit project. I'm not really sure how many of you know that one, but it's really a large ICT project in the Netherlands. My interests are making social platforms support human values and understand social situations. Okay, enough of the About Me slide. Let's just go first to your privacy and newsfeed settings. Just to set the definition kind of straight, on Facebook, for example, you could create lists, and you can choose whether your next post or your next status is shared with which list. And basically, that means that you've added a rule to a list of rules that exist in your social application. So, same thing. If you follow someone on Twitter, that means you've added a rule to your privacy or newsfeed settings, and that rule means I want to see this person's updates. Just like with Facebook, you said, I don't want this content shared with this or the other list. And with WhatsApp, for example, if people can see that you've read and ignored their messages, well, that's also another rule in your list of privacy rules, because that means that they can see whether you checked their message or whether you're online. So in this context, for this presentation, I'm just going to be saying that privacy settings are the rules that you set for controlling what you share and what you receive with other people. And for the moment, I'm just going to call it privacy settings. But what I really mean is what you share and what you receive. So not only what you share with other people. So just for today, it's easier just to call it privacy settings. So what exactly is wrong with privacy settings? If anyone might want to give us an example, what do you think is wrong with privacy settings? Like one thing. Of course, yeah, it's one thing. What else? Sorry?
Not very effective.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, can anybody tell me what is basically, what do you think is one thing that is wrong with privacy settings? Anyways, first of all, you're all familiar with this. This is Facebook's privacy settings, and it's actually one of the menus that exist in one social applications out of the many that everybody uses on a daily purpose. And it's obviously a maze, and it's very complicated to make sense of. So the first thing that's actually wrong with privacy settings is that it's complicated. The second thing that's wrong with privacy settings, well, to give you an example, I have a picture on my Facebook that looks like this. And the idea is that I shared this picture only with a few people that I know I don't have a problem with that. But one of those people actually shared that picture on his own public timeline. So, and that is, he didn't really like take a screenshot and post it. No, it was just done usually. You clicking the share button. So what I thought was going to happen to my data is not exactly what happened at all, according to the privacy settings that I set for that. So the second thing that is wrong with privacy settings is that it's misleading. So it doesn't do what you think it's going to do. A third thing that is wrong with privacy settings is, well, another example. We all have these kind of people in our social networks. Well, they complain a lot and then they post stuff that you don't really want to receive. You don't want to see that. But at the same time, if you use, for example, the hide button or the unfollow button, what you might miss out on some same contact from the same people that might, for example, invite you to our party, and that you would miss out on that because you just had to hide that person's update. Another example, for example, same picture that I was talking about. There was this person that I don't want her to see that picture at all, but I wouldn't mind if she saw that very profound Economist article that I shared the other day. So the point is, can I actually tell Facebook or Twitter or any social platform exactly what I want to happen for every now for that I have to actually do that for every object. It's very, very difficult to express what I want my privacy settings and my timeline settings to do in a very human kind of way. So the third thing that's wrong with privacy settings is that they're inexpressive. They don't let you express what you really want to happen. So again, to recap, privacy settings are complicated, misleading, inexpressive rules that we use in vain to try to control how our social applications behave. What happens is that you're not aware of what happens to your data and where it ends. You try to take control, it's too complicated, and it doesn't really end up working anyway. So at last you just give up and you accept things the way they are. I guess that was happening to most people. You just you accept that social media has the good side and the bad side, and you have to take both if you want to use it. So what do we have here? Agreement technologies. This is basically what I want to talk about in the sense that it's a new concept that might actually help to put back your control over your social media, to put that control back in your hands. What are agreement technologies? Essentially, they're an intermarriage of sort of three different fields: ethics, logic, and business processes. And I know that sounds really strange, because how could something be a combination of all three? But to give you an example, what is an agreement? An agreement is, well, let's take, for example, you have Bob enters into a contract with Mary, and this is from business, basically. So Bob and Mary are both sort of employees at different companies. They enter into a contract that Bob would deliver a product to Joe beginning the first of the month, and the expiry date for that action to happen is at some point, or if Bob leaves his job or some expiry condition. And if Bob doesn't really do that, well, he doesn't go to jail, but he'd get a fine or get fired or something like that. So what is an agreement? We have a creditor and a debtor, so that's Bob and Mary. We have a normative action, so Bob has to deliver, it's an obligation. We have a third party, that is Joe, related to the normative action. We have a trigger and an expiry, beginning of the month, if Bob leaves his job. And we have a sanction and a reward, in the sense that if Bob would do what's supposed to happen in the agreement, then Bob will get rewarded. If Bob doesn't, Bob will get sanctioned. So the idea here is that you think this happens in businesses, but this also happens online using intelligent agents. So web platforms like Amazon, for example, like any of the platforms that use big data, they actually have agents that have contracts between them. So this doesn't only happen between person to person, person to organization, or organization to organization, but it's more like automatic entities that have these agreements, and they that actually happens on the web all the time these days. So what if actually we take this concept of agreements and we simplify it and we sort of modify it to fit our needs, and we put it inside a social application. Well, the idea is that at the TU Delft, we have sort of the perfect application for that to try this out. We kind of developed a mobile app for children to share their check-ins with parents and friends. And the idea was that we wanted to create some sort of a social support platform for children between 6 and 12 so that we can help them make new friends and stay safe and all that. An app was developed. But let's just remember that for a moment. We'll get back to it. Because we wanted to talk about what are we going to do with this syntax, with this agreement. And what we did was a number of exploratory user studies. Of course, after some studies and model building, scenario boards, prototype testing, all of that stuff, we came up with this sort of simple formula, like a first sort of formula that out of this agreement model, and it looks something like this. So, is that clear? It could also be something like this. And this is basically an agreement menu. It's very simplified, first attempt. And this is what you can do with it. So the idea was that the first study is, well, the goal is to find out, can people easily use this thing that we've just developed? Well, of course, because just because we created it simply, it doesn't mean it's actually simple to everybody. So we did an online study, basically with 400 participants from the English-speaking countries, and the reason for that is that what we did is that we gave them scenarios, family life kind of scenarios, basically things that happen usually around every day in a family that has a child in a primary school. Every scenario essentially ends with a little problem. What we asked people to do is to try and solve that problem using the menu. And of course, we had a number of scenarios. We had, I think, 16. Each one of these scenarios had what I would call a designated solution. So it's a secret correct solution. In this case, it would be something like this. What happened in the study is that every participant did 4 randomly selected scenarios out of the 16 that we all had within 8 to 10 minutes. So, well, I mean, we didn't force them to do it in 8 to 10 minutes, but that's actually the time it took them. What we found out first is that by the first scenario, around 59% could find the correct solution. By the second one, it was about 60%. By the third one, it was 65%. I guess by the fourth one, but they were a little bored, and it dropped down to 62. The average for all was 62%, and take into account that this was only after 10 minutes, not more than 10 minutes, and after only 4 exercises. What we also did is that we asked people, how did this menu contribute towards solving the actual problem in the scenario? So was that even useful? Would the situation become better if you create this agreement? And there was a slider that they could rate whether it was what would happen. The contribution was very positive, or very negative, or there was no contribution. And it was numerified. So 0 would be very negative, 10 would be very, very positive, and 5 would be no contribution. And what we found is that on average it would be 7.9. So it's heavily towards the very positive. So that's basically the outcome of the first study, was that this sort of agreement idea is easy to use in a sense, and it's contributing. It can actually help solve problems in this kind of family life location sharing as a social app. Let's get back to the app, because like I said, well, we had an app that we wanted to give children to help them share their location with each other and with their parents. And this app had all of this, features, or I would call them, symptoms of, your average social media app, or location sharing app. So we had essentially, you could make lists like your family or your friends. You can add people to it. You can change which lists will see your check-ins, and you can change which lists can send you check-ins. And people can create locations on a map and all that stuff. So now, what if we take the agreement syntax that we found to be easy, and we put it inside the actual application? And that's actually what we did. We translated this syntax and we put it inside this app so that people can actually use it. And well, actually, that's not exactly what we did. What we did was we created two versions. The first one, it had all the stuff that I just showed you. The second one had all the stuff in the first one plus the agreement syntax. And the reason for that is that this is an sort of you're introduced a new effect, and you want to see how this is going to change the behavior of the user. Now, why did we do that exactly? Well, remember user studies that I talked about that we did? Well, it turns out there's a huge problem when it comes to sharing locations for children, obviously. Because parents these days want to, if they had the power, they would monitor their child's location at all time because of the safety issue. Just to give you a few examples from the US, basically, you have a bracelet developed. This is Samsung developed a bracelet that a child could wear it and would send GPS updates at all time to the parents. There are apps basically that parents install on children's phones, and then there's this app called Ignore No More, for example. I don't know if you've heard about it, but if you don't answer your father or your mother, then it would block Facebook for you. And there's a whole bunch of other really intrusive apps, though. What we found out was that there's a value tension. Of course, parents want to keep their children safe, but essentially in the process, they will ruin their life. And so the first, something like safety versus independence, that is a value tension, because when you try to sort of increase safety, you will decrease independence. Same thing goes for our app. If you share too many check-ins with your family list, this will happen. You also have the friendship versus responsibility. If you share too much with your friends, apparently as a child, well, friendship will go up, responsibility will go down. And there's way more value tensions that exist than just these two obvious examples. Well, I guess this is a perfect study case for the agreement syntax that we put there. Because essentially what we wanted to find out was, can the agreement syntax increase the values that we want to increase without actually harming the other values as a side effect? And exactly this is why we built the two versions. We went to 3 daycare centers. In Dutch, that's a kinderopvang. And we allowed 31 children between 6 and 11 years of age to test the two versions of our app. Basically, half of the children tested the version 1, which doesn't have the agreement syntax. The other half tested the version 2, which has the agreement syntax. The way they tested it is that we created some sort of a treasure hunt game. There was a pile of, what you see is mission cards here, and children had to go and pick a mission, and it would be something about, go outside and share your check-ins with your friends, or make sure that one of your friends would let you know when they're at a certain place. And when they would finish that mission, they would go back, give us the cards, and pick another one. And they did this for about an hour. And at the end, we made them answer a questionnaire, about 20 questions that are related to the values that I talked about, like friendship, independence. So, like I said, about 20 questions of these. And we went back a week later to these daycare centers, and we switched versions. So the kids that tried version 1, they had to try version 2, and the kids that tried version 2 tried version 1, and we did the same thing, played the same mission, they answered the questionnaire. The questionnaire was, like I said, 20 questions, and each couple of questions were grouped together to form what we call a value theme. And we eventually ended up with 6 values in that questionnaire. Each one was related to a number of the questions. What we found out, actually, by analyzing the questionnaire, and this is just actually a very recent development, is that the version that had the agreement syntax increased friendship, increased independence, and there was actually no harm on any of the other values. So they essentially did not change between the 2 versions. Anyways, recap to the main point of this presentation, that traditional privacy settings are complicated, misleading, and inexpressive. We through these two user studies that I talked about, we showed that agreement technologies can potentially be, first, easy to use and understand, and the second thing is that expressive enough so that you would promote, the values that you want to promote without causing a harm to other values or other important aspects of your social app as a side effect. I guess as a final message, I like to say that this is the first prototype. This is a simple agreement menu, and agreement technology in reality can be much more sophisticated, and you can do so much more with them. And that this was done and developed for research purposes. The idea here is that there is a potential for developing these agreement models to work with commercial social apps. I really see a potential in that. So, yeah, I guess that was one of the shortest presentations then. Yeah.
Thank you, Alex. Any questions from you? Did you get all this? Anyone who wants to know a bit more? Well, what I am curious about, this was just about check-ins and sharing with families.
Yes.
And you say it has a lot more potential. But where comes the difficult part when you extend it to, like, on Facebook?
Yeah, I think the difficult part would be that it would obviously need to be more than just for menu sliders or spinners. It would have to, the more complicated the case would be, the bigger the syntax has to be, and then the more problematic it has to become. Yeah, I think that's the biggest scalability challenge.
Yeah, but will it still be easy to use, or will it get complicated as well?
Well, it would, just because it would look complicated visually, that doesn't mean that it would require any more cognitive effort. So, of course, there has to be several cycles of development before you can claim that it still has the same sort of ease of use as this one.
Thank you. Anyone else? At the back.
Thank you. Hi. Actually, what are you thinking about breaking the policies in order to keep our privacies? For instance, having double profile on Facebook or so on and so on. Thank you.
Right. What exactly is the question?
What are you thinking about those? Do you think that it will be best practice to actually create like different kind of profiles in order to keep our privacy?
Well, the idea is that creating another profile now it's not as simple as it is, because you've invested a lot of emotional effort in your first profile, and if you had to abandon that, it's like starting all from the start. It's actually very
So Actually, like I'm just taking Facebook as an example.
Yeah.
As you said, it's very complicated. I guess everyone here will agree that it's kind of difficult to keep everything that we want to keep private, really private. In my experience, I started like using Facebook, having like multiple like selective criteria for my friends, family, and so on, with privacy, semi-privacy, total privacy, and stuff like that. But I figured out that anyway, there will be like pictures of me or comments that will be linking through to those people's. So I actually created I have currently 3 Facebook accounts, one for really good friends, one for my personal artwork that I'm doing, and another one for professional aspects. So I actually select the people that I want, I select my friends or people like professional acquaintance, and just put them in those profiles.
Yeah, so the thing is, I said, it's...
in order to keep my privacy. So my question is is something that you will not promote, but advise? Or is there another way to really take the control of our privacy?
So. Currently, there aren't. You just had to create 3 profiles because you wanted to keep things that you share separated,
which is insane.
And it's going to happen eventually, the more and more people engage on social media, you're going to have to separate things. And one of the things that I was trying to show in agreement technologies is that you could express yourself a little better and saying, I don't want my personal photos shared with my colleagues. Because this is a very, if you really had to do that, you either have to create 3 accounts or you really have to customize one account to the, extremely. And if there was a very simple humanistic kind of way you could tell the application, I want you to do this, then that should really solve the case.
So in summary, in order to keep our privacy, we should bend the rules.
Yeah, you can say that.
Thank you.
One other question?
Yes, it's about, this sounds interesting, but I think, for example, Facebook changed the rules so that they now own the pictures that you put on their platform, that they can use them where they deem fit. I think that's the real problem. So it's not about, I see this is as a way on the front end, but on the back end, you don't have control over the picture, so this gives you an idea of it. But
I have a colleague at the University of Southampton that is working on the same idea for your terms and conditions, that huge piece of text that nobody reads. If you could create a customized, easy to use, easy to sort of interpret, like this one, agreement with Facebook regarding your terms and conditions, and not only that things will be better for you, but then you will understand, you will be at least finally familiar with this huge legal text and then you will be able to decide for yourself rather than just click and accept. So, hope that answers your question.
I'm not sure it was a question, but yes, thanks.
A statement. Anyone else struggling with privacy settings at the back?
I was wondering, let's say that Facebook is going to help developing this prototype, and they're going to end up building this into their platform. Earlier in your presentation, you said that one of the risks of the current privacy settings is that you're going to miss out on things because you choose certain people that you don't want to hear about anymore. How is this, in the end, going to help you to keep in touch with the things that you want to keep in touch about? Because even this is still a filter. You choose to filter certain things out.
Yes, it's a filter, but it's also the way that you filter things right now is reactive. It's not. You don't take the initiative. You see something that you might like, so you'd say, I'd like to see more of that. You see something that you don't like, you'd say, I don't want to see the whole, all the updates by this person. And so it's sort of like you react to what you see. I think if you could use something like that, then you could take the initiative and say, I want to see stuff related to this very specific from this person. instead of waiting for them to show you what you need to see and then decide whether you want it or not. Yeah.
Right. How do you think this is going to be developed further?
Well, first of all, it has to solve some of its own problems, because you could create conflicting agreements with the same people. The idea is that a social application we view that as an intelligent app, so that it could sometimes refuse to comply with an agreement that you made because of certain. So basically, let's suppose you have a parent who wants their child to share their chickens every single half an hour, and then the app decides that, okay, I'm sort of harming a certain value for the child, which is their freedom and independence, and it would violate. Of course, it will be subject to sanctions, like we said, as an agent, but then it would have to weigh its options. That's the idea. So that's one of the things that it has to sort of solve before this can become readily available.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for those questions. Anyone else?
Well, it's not exactly a question, but kind of a tip. Last night we had a programmed a documentary here called Terms and Conditions May Apply. And there were exactly 0 people in the room. But that was a kind of a programming fail. But I do recommend this documentary to anyone who is concerned about their privacy or wants to know more about what companies like Google and Facebook actually know about you, and how the government can't track you directly, but they can actually track a lot of you via these companies like Google and Facebook. So the documentary is also available on Netflix since a few weeks, and anyone who's interested in a thriller about privacy, it's a must-watch documentary.
Thank you, Maarten.
Yeah.
Terms and conditions may apply.
Thank you. Well, I think that's all for now. Thank you, Alex. Time for lunch right now. We're back at 2 at all stages. Here we'll have Marcel Broersma. If you're in control, you're not driving fast enough. See you after lunch.
Social media op zijn Rotterdamst.